Welcome into On Texas Football. I'm Bobby Burton, joined by Steve Palazzolo, a co-host of Check the Mic podcast. He is a NFL draft and NFL expert that we've leaned on more than once now to talk a little bit about the Longhorns with the upcoming draft next weekend. Steve, thanks for taking some time this morning, man.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I appreciate you very much. And obviously the Longhorns right now in a situation, they had 14 guys go to the combine. Steve, and before we get into maybe what you think of the individual players, because I know you have some strong opinions of where you're hearing they might go and that sort of thing, I want to ask you about maybe a question more germane to the Texas audience and Texas football program as a whole. Last year, I think 11 guys drafted. This year, 14 guys go to the combine. It's indicative of a Texas program that is on the rise, obviously. And it's bearing out maybe in the NFL draft as much as anywhere. You've been a long time viewer of that and analyst of the NFL draft. What are your thoughts on kind of the ascension of Texas, and or is it just because they're winning they're getting these guys in, or is it more development? What is the total package that you're seeing, I guess, from the Longhorns?
No, I think it's pretty distinct that, especially on offense, they look fast. There's speed every year. I mean, to go from Bijan Robinson to Jonathan Brooks to Jaden Blue, I mean, you could see the speed. You could see the creativity in the play calling. You could see what Sark is doing offensively to just put the offense in really good position to put points on the board. And then I think in totality, I mean, I remember 8 or 10 years ago talking to another pretty prominent draft analyst about Texas players. And he said, hey, perception is that they're soft. I mean, he just said it. He came out and said it to me. I mean, in private, and I don't know how much he said in public, but there was this perception that you didn't necessarily want to go and take the Texas players, or they couldn't handle some adversity or whatever it may have been, right or wrong. That was the perception. So I'm just passing that along. But I think that's changed quite a bit. And you see, offensive lineman going to get drafted in the first round in Kelvin Banks, right? You start to see, players in the trenches getting drafted on both sides of the ball and now getting drafted pretty high. So I think they're starting to feel like what the SEC perception's always been, right? Strength in the trenches, speed. And I think Texas has absolutely had all of that over the last couple of years.
It's interesting because the more you dive into it, the numbers at Texas, while it's been there's a decade where Texas fell off. I witnessed that firsthand, and I know you're a national analyst, so you only see it kind of tangentially, but you clearly people noticed it for a decade. But when Mac Brown had it rolling, even he didn't necessarily have this many draft picks in a draft. And I feel like that may be maybe a little bit of the secret sauce of what Steve Sarkisian's doing at Texas. It's not just the Brian Arakpos or the Quentin Jammers or the Vince Youngs. It's the vast number, the sheer volume that Texas is putting out.
Yeah, they're getting players all over the place on both sides of the ball. So whether it's a little bit of recruiting, obviously I think they've done a great job in the portal, pulling in players that are high impact players, and then developing as well. I mean, they've figured it out. I've followed all the various cycles and the different coaching changes, and it's trying to keep up with recruiting in such a hotbed, and maybe losing a couple steps there. But they absolutely seem back, because it's not just a 1-year thing. It is every single year. They look fast, they look explosive, both sides of the ball, and there's far more talent at Texas now than there was 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Before we go further, I want to say thank you to our friends over at Advanced Pain Care for sponsoring the Saturday morning conversation.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
All right, let's get into it individually, Steve. You've got there's 3 guys really for the Longhorns that are in that first round range that we talked about in our pre-production meeting this morning. Kelvin Banks, you already mentioned him, the offensive lineman, clearly one. Matthew Golden, the wide receiver in that categorization. And then also Jahdae Barron, the defensive back that won the Thorpe Award. What are your feelings on those three players? And do you think they're kind of plugged into that right area of the draft at this point?
Yeah, I mean, they're all expected to go in the first round, obviously, but some could sneak into the top 15, maybe even close to the top 10. I mean, there's even rumors about Banks maybe being a favorite of the Raiders at 6. First off, I like Banks as a player. I think he's in that top tackle tier, maybe a slightly below Will Campbell and Armand Membu, but he's right there. I know some people like Banks better as a guard than a tackle, but I think he can handle it. And then, depending on where he goes, if he goes to Miami at 13, where, maybe he would play guard for a year and could be the tackle going forward. I think he has that flexibility. If San Francisco were to take him at 11, has that flexibility to play guard and maybe kick out to tackle. So I think he's a top 15 caliber player in this draft. I love Jahdae Barron. I mean, he's the guy last time I was on the show, I think I said it. Hey, I just got back from the combine. Everybody's raving about him. And I like to follow where the consensus draft boards go, because I think it just gives you an idea of the quote draft stock and where people are catching up to players. Before the combine, it was like, oh, late first round, maybe, second round. And I remember watching them all fall. I'm thinking this guy's a first round player. And I think the consensus started to catch up with Barron, especially when he ran the sub 4.40. Only question with him is the arm length being a little bit shorter for some prototypical outside cornerback size and expectations for certain schemes. But man, he could play in the slot, he could play outside, he could play off coverage. Love that play that he had against Colorado State where he robs the crosser when he's playing deep quarter. I mean, it's just unbelievable football players digging in there in the run game as a line at the linebacker level. Barron does it all. So I love him as a player. I think he's going to be I think he's a top 15 caliber player if the right fit is there as far as teams go. And then Golden's the one I just have questions about, because he ran the 4.29, but we know, again, said it last time, I never felt 4.29 type of speed. Right?
You're speaking. I mean, Texas fans would agree with that. Now they think was a terrific player last half of the season, but the go-to guy early in the year was Isaiah Bond.
Right.
And Golden kind of got his sea legs after the year got going, but he was never, quote unquote, the deep threat, even though he ran a 4.29. Right.
And Bonds just felt faster on the field. They ran the speed, the deep over routes. They ran those type of routes for Bonds to get him, to use his speed. So I think that works both ways. On one hand, he's got a 4.29 under his belt, and maybe there's more to, for him to, be more of a deep threat. And then on the other side, like, his best traits are route running and just being really slick in and out of routes. Love how he sets up corners. So there's a lot to like about Golden's game. And so that's where I think, because there were questions about Teterow and McMillan at the top, he doesn't have that pure speed. He's more of a size type of player, and he's not as good of a pure wide receiver prospect as last year's probably top 4 who came out in the first round. There's a chance Golden's the top receiver off the board if you're not counting Travis Hunter. So Golden could be there for Dallas at 12, other teams in the teens that need a receiver. So depending on how they value that speed, his route running ability, I think he's pretty good at a lot of things, and he's got a 4.29 under his belt. So that's the type of player that usually goes in the first round.
Steve, you mentioned that NFL mock draft database. Those guys all expected to go in that 20 and below range is essentially right. I mean, so Thursday night, likely to hear all of them in the first half of the draft, basically first 2/3 of it at least.
I think so. Golden's the only guy I could see maybe falling a little bit just because of from a positional value standpoint. There's a ton of edge rushers. There's a ton of defensive tackles. If teams are trying to get the big guys early, we see this sometimes with receivers where they space them all together. And versus, I get you. Because even last year they had the 3 at the top quickly. Brian Thomas Jr. went in the middle of the first round, and then there was a receiver run late first and into the second. There was a ton of those guys. I think this class is similar, where you'll see maybe late first and into the second round, there'll be a lot of receivers. But Golden very much in that first round mix. And it only takes one. If Dallas really wants Golden at 12, then he's going at 12. no matter what other teams think. But he's the one guy I could see maybe being a little bit more the back end of the first round.
It's interesting you talk about those spurts in the draft where they go on positional spurts. Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, they all went in that 25 and to 40 range and all had really good seasons, I think, overall. Those are the top three. I want to go next to two guys that are a little bit more questionable. Questionable is not the right word. Intriguing. One is Quinn Ewers, because I read something last week. ESPN came out with an article that said the most likely quarterback of the top 7 to be a bust in the NFL is Quinn Ewers. So him, and then Isaiah Bond and his off-field issues this offseason and what that means for those two. Let's start with Ewers, because Texas fans love Quinn Ewers because of what he did and what he's done for the program overall. At the same time, him going on to the NFL is a different story. What's your kind of prognostication and your thought process there?
That's harsh on Quinn that ESPN's going to call him a bust. I mean,
96.7% chance, according to their.
Yeah, okay, I get it. So it's just harsh terminology for saying there's a low percentage chance that he hits, which I get. That's fine.
Yeah.
Calling him a bust when he's not going to go, in the first couple of rounds is harsh.
Yes.
But I get it, right? So analytically, that's coming from an analytical standpoint. Hey, there's not a lot of data that says this guy, he's going to hit. Yeah. He's a challenging one because obviously, my friend JT O'Sullivan does QB school. He does unbelievable breakdowns right here on YouTube. And he said, you got to go back to 2022 for the Bama tape and watch that. Might be the best half basically that Quinn ever played. And so that's the challenge, right? I think there's that game. And then the Michigan game, I really thought there was a lot of GMs in town for that game last year at Michigan. And I thought that was the best game that he played. So there's a couple of those games where you say, okay, I see the talent in Quinn Ewers, right? You see him in that Michigan game, the negated touchdown on the move. Just some beautiful throws, pocket movement, feel, just ran the offense extremely well. And I thought he was on this pace to show consistent improvement, which is what Bo Nix did in his career. Bo Nix started out as just he was all over the place at Auburn and then showed consistent improvement. And, 60 starts in, it's like, all right, we've got a somewhat polished quarterback that could go to the NFL and had some success. So I thought Ewers was on that trajectory before the injuries. And so those work both ways, right? There's an excuse that he's trying to play through injury, but he's also been injured 3 straight years, parts of 3 straight years. So I think all of those things have to be taken into account. It's still worth looking at. I don't think he's as toolsy as the, one of the best QB prospects of all time you would expect, right?
Yeah,
I don't think he doesn't have a cannon for an arm. It's not like you're getting this Anthony Richardson or this, even a Jalen Milroe, this incredibly talented player that's just got to put it all together and you got to mold. So that's the thing I think is kind of working against him, where if he was cannon for an arm and extremely athletic, you would say, hey, he's battled these injuries. He's shown some progress. Let's get him in. So I think that's what's working against him. But I think he looked like a guy that could come in, run the offense. If he could stay healthy, can hit everything up at the intermediate level, inconsistent deep ball. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of QBs in this class who are worth mid to late round flyers. And I think he's just in that mix to see if he can, figure it out at the next level.
Are you thinking rounds 4 through 7? You thinking 6 and 7? What's the in your opinion, where the consensus has him right
now?
I
think after Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, and Jackson Dart, who all could be first round, maybe Dart sneaks into the second, perhaps. I think beyond that, QBs 4 through 9 in this class could be anywhere. So anywhere from the 3rd round on. And that ends up becoming very need-based. There's a lot of rumors that Tyler Shuck from Louisville is going to go in the top 40. So if you take him off the board, you're talking about Kyle McCord and Dylan Gabriel, Will Howard, Quinn, Jalen Milroe. Milroe's invited to the draft. Is he going to go in the first 2 rounds? But I think that chunk of quarterbacks, it becomes a need-based thing. And like last year, Spencer Rattler went in the 5th because there just weren't a whole lot of backup quarterback options at that point. So I think anywhere from 4 through 7, depending on how many teams still have backup quarterback needs. And I think that's where a bunch of those guys come off the board.
Yeah, Quinn's strengths as a quarterback have been the short timing throws in RPO game. And that doesn't necessarily jive with what works in the NFL best.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's a hard. I understand why people say the data doesn't necessarily support it, but to your point, it'll be interesting. Let's talk about Isaiah Bond, because even though he only spent 1 year in Austin, he had a really good first half of the year and then faded in the second half when he had a blown tire, essentially with an ankle injury, kind of became an afterthought in the Texas offense. But he's had some off-field issues, Steve.
Right.
And what's the latest with him before we talk to about a couple other guys?
I mean, before some of those off-field issues came to light, that's all I was hearing, talking to people around the league. It's like, hey, the character's rough. And the receiver who I loved last year, who was unbelievable on the field, but had the similar type of report, was Jermaine Burton. And Jermaine Burton was Georgia and Alabama. At both schools, the reports were like, hey, nobody's saying a nice word about Jermaine Burton across a couple different schools. But when you watch him on the field, he looks like a first-round player. And he goes to Cincinnati, and a lot of the off-field showed up, right? He wasn't showing up for practice, and he was out late at night, and he was getting benched, and, wasn't traveling with the team just because he wasn't doing his job. And so Burton went in the third round, and I'm getting similar off-field character type of vibes from Isaiah Bond. There's, Saban at Bama, didn't love him. Don't know what was going on at Texas necessarily, other than, hey, when that happens, a number of teams just take the guy off the board, right? Because they only have 7 picks, 8 picks, 9 picks, and they don't want to use one. And sometimes you want to, because the talent is there. Obviously, he moves differently. He's fast. He's faster than the 4.41 that he ran at the combine. When he's saying he was going to run a 4.2, like, he feels like that on the field. So you can use him as an incredible deep threat, speed type of receiver. But yeah, the off field, I think, is an issue. And I think, obviously some things are starting to come to light over these last few weeks.
Speaking of Steve Palazzolo of the co-host Check the Mic podcast, excellent work that he does on YouTube and podcast. Steve, I had another question for you. You mentioned early, I want to last 3 guys, I guess, or 4 maybe. Jaden Blue, you mentioned him briefly. It's a loaded running back class, yet Blue kind of did something. He's a different type of running back in this class, and that he's a speed guy, right? And not this Travion Henderson or Ashton Genty type. He's more of a boutique player, or for lack of a better term. Alfred Collins, the defensive lineman, Andrew Makuba, and then Gunnar Helm. And then I know there are others at Texas, but let's stick with those for right now.
Yeah, as far as Blue, I mean, I don't love him as a pure running back. I loved Jonathan Brooks last year. I thought he was the clear top, most talented running back, despite the injuries. I don't think Blue has the pure running back skills. I love him as a receiving threat, though. So I think the right team, he reminded me of, when you get into the red zone, a guy like Geno Smith always tends to make bad decisions. He's with the Raiders now. Makes bad decisions in the red zone. And I was thinking a guy like Jaden Blue would be a great fit for someone that just needs open receivers in the red zone. You create those mismatches. You get them one-on-one with a linebacker. You start to scheme open some of those plays. You get the 2 wheel routes against Ohio State, of course, for touchdowns. I think that's his role, right? A running back 3 where he's a pass-catching back. You move him around a little bit, create mismatches. I think he's at his best doing that. As far as
I agree with you about everything you just said. I totally agree. And I think Texas fans nod their head too.
Yeah.
The reality of it, he scored 14 touchdowns last year.
Yeah.
And it's because Sark found a way to put him in man-to-man situations in large part, or he broke off a long run off tackle against Clemson, right? I mean, those things happen when he gets that level. Collins, Makuba, Helm, and I appreciate so much your time here. So I'm trying to keep it short. So not going through every single Texas player, but highlight a lot of them.
Well, there's a lot going in the first 3 rounds, so it's going to be fun. Alfred Collins, I liked quite a bit. It's a deep defensive tackle class as well. Last year there were not a whole lot. I think, what did he weigh in at? Around 330?
Yeah.
Last year there was like 2 of those guys. Tavondre Sweat being one of them. And, McKinley Jackson coming out of A&M, I thought was overdrafted last year in the 3rd round. Now there's a bunch of these guys, 330 plus. And the NFL is looking for those guys. They're looking for, interior run plugging types. Collins isn't really that because he moves pretty well. I think he's a batted pass threat. He's got some pass rush ability, and he's pretty good overall against the run. So last year, year 5 was his best all-around season, kind of a breakout year for him. But I think he's disruptive and in a deep defensive tackle class. I don't know if some teams value him in the second, or if more because there's so many, he ends up going 3rd or 4th round, or where that ends up landing. But I like Collins. I think it's a deep class, and he's one of those good players that fits in there. And again, there's not a lot of players that are 330 that move that well. This draft happens to have 3 or 4 of those guys, but normally you don't find those types of players. The Gunnar Helm stuff, the injury at the combine, of course, affected those metrics, but I thought he was a pretty smooth receiver. I thought, just smooth was the word that kept coming to mind, watching him run crossing routes, run a corner, run a post. So I think he's definitely a good receiving threat. There's very few tight ends where I say, hey, this guy's a great run blocker coming out of college. You don't get that very often. It's just, can you hit a target on the move, and can you get in the way and at least slow guys down? I think he at least has some of that to him. So I like Helm. I think a lot of people like the tight end class. That I think it's pretty deep. I think there's probably 3 starters at the top: Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, Mason Taylor from LSU. And I think beyond that, it's kind of, tight end 2 types. I think Helm's in that, kind of a tight end 2 receiving threat type that could develop into a starter. And then Makuba, same thing. I think the toughest position to figure out draft position wise is safety, because there's 2 guys that you would say are 1st round talents: Malachi Starks from Georgia, Nick Emanwari from South Carolina. But the NFL doesn't always value. There's only been 5 safeties in the 1st round over the last 5 years. So you don't always you have like Brian Branch went in the 2nd round. That dude's a baller, and he's a baller at the NFL level. So you get some good safeties go in the 2nd round. Javon Holland a couple years ago out of Oregon. So it's tough to say if Starks or Emanwari go in the 1st, then Makuba is probably part of this 2nd wave of safety. And again, it's a lot of eye of the beholder type of how do you value the safety position and what's the role he's going to play. But I mean, I loved watching him play, working downhill, using his eyes, breaking up passes, tackling pretty well. So I think Makuba's, not as flashy as the Emanwaris, who just had an awesome combine. Safety is probably the position I care the least about athleticism. It's all about seeing the game, reacting, making plays. And I think Makuba has a lot of that. So he feels like the type of guy you get 3rd round, say, and just becomes a nice, consistent starter for you.
Yeah, he may end up being a 7-year starter for you.
Yeah,
or
absolutely.
A 2nd contract, but he's not necessarily, because he plays the position he does, it's not necessarily highly drafted. All right, overall, good stuff, Steve. I appreciate your time. Again, that's Steve Palazzolo, co-host Check the Mic podcast on YouTube. Visit him; it's good stuff. I've been following it now for a couple of months, Steve, and I appreciate you picking up the phone whenever I rang you to try to get you to come on, man.
Of course, anytime. Appreciate it. And enjoy the draft. Always a fun time.
You too. Again, Advanced Pain Care is our sponsor of the Saturday morning conversation. Here's more from them.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.